When you open a chocolate bar right now, it has probably never even crossed your mind that every square inside was once the most controversial food in Europe. Today, chocolate is one of the world's most beloved snacks, a $130 billion industry every year. That magical thing we reach for on birthdays, on Valentine's Day, in sad moments. The thing that sends your happiness hormones through the roof. Children recognize it in every corner of the world. Adults crave it. Poets praise it. But when Europe first encountered chocolate in the 16th century, it welcomed it not as a delicacy, but as a threat. The story begins in the depths of Central America. But before we get into the story, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. For the Aztecs, cacao was not merely a drink. It was seen as a sacred gift given to humans by the gods. According to Aztec mythology, the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl had personally stolen the cacao tree from heaven and brought it to humans. The Aztecs knew this drink as xocotl, bitter, foamy, sometimes mixed with red pepper, a drink that warmed you from the inside. This was certainly no ordinary thing. It was believed to give warriors strength, purify the soul, and bring humans closer to the gods. Historical sources record that Aztec Emperor Montezuma drank 50 cups of cacao a day, and that the cacao stalks in his palace reached thousands of sacks. And cacao was also a currency. In Central American markets, a turkey could be bought for 100 cacao seeds, an avocado for a few cacao seeds. A slave changed hands for a few hundred cacao seeds. So chocolate was simultaneously a sacred drink, an economic instrument, and a display of social status. It stood at the very center of Aztec civilization. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés set foot on the lands of present-day Mexico. Aztec Emperor Montezuma received him with great ceremony and welcomed him with cacao, as was the custom with important guests. Cortés did not much enjoy this drink. It was not a flavor he was accustomed to, too bitter, too foreign for his palate. But he immediately noticed one thing. In these lands, cacao was worth as much as gold. When returning to Spain, he loaded his ship not only with gold and silver ingots, but also with cacao seeds. Cacao reached the Spanish court in 1528. At first, no one knew what to do with it, until someone thought to combine cacao with sugar. Once it moved away from its bitter taste and took on a sweet character, this mysterious drink became the favorite thing of Spanish nobility. Blended with cinnamon, vanilla, and sugar in the royal kitchens, cacao transformed into a status symbol. For years, Spain kept this secret from the rest of Europe. But secrets cannot be kept forever. When chocolate slowly began to overflow the walls of the palaces, the most powerful institution in Europe went on alert: the Catholic Church. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, now is the perfect time. I tell history's most unexpected stories, and this is only just beginning. In the 16th century, the undisputed greatest authority in Europe was the Catholic Church. It held not only spiritual, but political and economic power in its hands. Popes had the power to remove emperors from their thrones. They could raise armies and excommunicate entire countries. Nothing that the Church did not approve of could be done. New substances coming from different regions were met with particular suspicion, and chocolate settled right at the top of this suspicious category. The Church's opposition to chocolate had several different reasons. The first and most important was the matter of origin. Chocolate came from the Aztecs, and in the Church's eyes, the Aztecs were the greatest pagans.
How could the sacred drink of a civilization that held ceremonies in the name of its own gods and worshipped only its own deities spread through a Christian society? Some clergymen took this even further, claiming that chocolatl was directly connected to the devil. It was called the devil's drink. It was called the flavor from hell. These expressions began to find their way into sermons across 16th century Europe. The second reason was the effects of chocolate on the human body. Cacao genuinely gave energy and stimulated the human mind. Some priests went even further, claiming that chocolate increased sexual desire and weakened the body's control and human willpower. For a Christian who was fasting, disciplining their body, and trying to stay away from every worldly pleasure, this was not something acceptable. A food could not be both this delicious and this stimulating. It must have a diabolical side. This logic seemed entirely correct and acceptable to the people of that era. The third, and perhaps the most interesting, was the matter of fasting. Fasting days were extremely frequent in the Catholic calendar, and a real debate broke out within the Church about whether drinking chocolate broke this fast or not. Some bishops argued that chocolate was a liquid, therefore it did not fall within the scope of the solid food prohibition and could be consumed. Others claimed exactly the opposite. Chocolate was nutritious, it gave energy, therefore it absolutely broke the fast. This debate could not be resolved for decades. Bishops in different regions set different rules. Under the same church roof, chocolate was simultaneously permitted and banned. And it was precisely at this point that one of history's strangest claims entered the scene. Some historical sources report that Pope Urban VIII personally drank chocolate to definitively settle this debate and said, "This is just a drink. It does not break the fast." In other words, the man at the very top of the church, who had viewed chocolate with suspicion, questioned its origins, and whose preachers had called it the devil's drink, was secretly drinking it himself. History's irony can sometimes be this sharp. If you are among that 99.9% who are in love with chocolate, like the video now and subscribe to my channel.
Pope Urban VIII's decision did not end the chocolate debate. On the contrary, it contributed to the faster spread of chocolate across Europe. At least now it had passed the approval of someone people trusted. And this approval provided the opportunity chocolate needed to escape the walls of the palaces and descend into the streets of Europe. But this spread happened far faster than anyone had imagined. In the mid-17th century, chocolate houses began opening one by one in the great cities of Europe. The first chocolate house that opened in London in 1657 was met with enormous interest. In Paris, the nobles of the Palace of Versailles incorporated drinking chocolate into their daily routines. In Vienna, Amsterdam, and Madrid, chocolate was no longer only drunk in royal kitchens, but had begun to be consumed in the homes of wealthy merchants and tradespeople. Something that had been notorious as the devil's drink a generation earlier was now being served in the most elegant salons of Europe. But chocolate had not yet been consumed in its solid form of today. In the 17th and 18th centuries, chocolate was almost always consumed as a hot drink. It became the rival of coffee. In some periods, it was even more popular than coffee. And just like coffee, chocolate became the center of a social activity. People were meeting in chocolate houses, chatting, exchanging ideas. These venues gradually transformed into the first intellectual discussion spaces of Europe. But the church had not sunk into complete silence. Some clergymen continued to resist chocolate. And the most striking example of this resistance occurred in Germany in 1624.
A priest named Johann Franciscus Rausch wrote a book called Pemptus Apologeticus. In this book, he argued that chocolate should absolutely be banned. His justification was shocking. Chocolate was making priests too excited, disrupting the order of the monastery and interfering with religious life. So according to Rausch, the problem was no longer chocolate's diabolical origins. The problem was that chocolate was too good. This argument went down in history as one of the strangest anti-chocolate justifications ever made. And when this book was published, it was not laughed at in Europe, but seriously debated. Before we move on to the best part of the story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The transition of chocolate to solid form took quite a long time. The transformation of this drink, consumed as a liquid for centuries, into its form today was the product of several important discoveries and a fortunate accident. By the end of the 18th century, chocolate had become one of the most widespread drinks in Europe, but it was still expensive, it still required an intensive production process, and it was still a luxury accessible only to those above a certain income level. The first major step to change this came in 1828 from Dutch chemist Conrad van Houten. Van Houten invented a press machine that separated cocoa butter from cocoa powder. This invention made two things possible, both cheaper and more consistent chocolate production. Chocolate was now transforming into a product accessible not only to the wealthy, but also to the middle class. The second major step came in 1847 from the British company Fries and Sons. The company combined cocoa butter, cocoa powder, and sugar to produce the first solid chocolate bar. People could now consume chocolate not with a cup, but by holding it in their hands. This was a revolutionary change. Chocolate was no longer a drink, it was a food. The third and perhaps most important step came from Swiss inventors Henri Nestlé and Daniel Peter. In 1875, Peter combined condensed milk developed by Nestlé with chocolate to invent milk chocolate. This invention completely changed the taste of chocolate, creamier, softer, a flavor that appealed to wider audiences. The foundation of modern chocolate had been laid. And today, 7.5 million tons of chocolate are produced worldwide every year. This substance that was once called the devil's drink, that churches tried to ban, that disrupted the order of monks, today became the world's undisputed most beloved food. This must be history's most delicious irony. If right now you are also thinking about eating chocolate, don't forget to write it in the comments. See you in the next video.